In the early 1940s, World War II was in full swing, and the fighting was fierce across Europe. The Axis powers, led by Nazi Germany, were pushing further into Allied territory, creating a sense of urgency and fear among Allied leaders. They knew that something had to change to avoid further losses and to start regaining control. As the situation became more dire, discussions among Allied leaders began to focus on a major offensive plan. They realized that they needed to take decisive action to strike back against the Axis powers. In their meetings, leaders like Winston Churchill, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Dwight D. Eisenhower brainstormed ideas that would lead to an ambitious operation. Their goal was clear: launch a large-scale invasion to reclaim Europe from Nazi control. This operation would later be known as Operation Overlord, but it was just a concept at the time. The leaders understood that this mission could be a turning point in the war. They believed that if they could successfully land troops on the beaches of Normandy, it would boost Allied morale and show the world that they were ready to fight back. Allied leaders knew they had to plan carefully. They took months to outline strategies and logistics, mindful of the risks involved. They gathered intelligence on German forces, studied the geography of the beaches, and contemplated the best timing for the invasion. Each decision was crucial, as they faced an enemy that was determined and well-prepared. As preparations ramped up, the Allies trained soldiers in various countries, often practicing landings and maneuvers to ensure they were ready for the actual event. Despite the uncertainty and danger, there was a shared sense of purpose among the troops. They knew they would be part of something historic and felt the weight of their mission. The Allies also worked to deceive the Germans about their true plans. This included creating fake armies and misleading information to confuse the enemy. They wanted to ensure that when D-Day arrived, German forces would be caught off guard. As the preparations continued, hope began to build. Allied leaders felt that they were on the precipice of changing the course of the war. There was a growing belief that Operation Overlord could pave the way for victory in Europe and ultimately lead to the end of Nazi domination. This hope was crucial, as it kept spirits high during a difficult time in the war. As the plans for D-Day came together, the Allies knew they had to be clever. They launched a series of deception strategies under the name Operation Bodyguard. The main goal was to confuse the Germans about when and where the invasion would happen. They wanted the enemy to feel secure, believing their defenses were sufficient everywhere. To carry ISO out, the Allies used a mix of tricks. One of the key strategies was creating fake radio traffic. They set up pretend communications to make it sound like large troop movements were happening far from the real landing sites in Normandy. This was meant to mislead German intelligence and divert their focus. Another important aspect of Operation Bodyguard was the creation of phantom armies. The Allies constructed fake units, complete with inflatable tanks and soldiers. They even used sound equipment to simulate the noise of troops preparing for battle. This made the Germans think that a massive invasion was about to occur in a different location, drawing their attention and resources away from Normandy. In addition to these tactics, the Allies also created dummy landing crafts. These mock ships were placed in areas that suggested an invasion was going to happen in those spots, further strengthening the illusion. By spreading out their efforts, they aimed to overwhelm enemy defenses and create doubt among German commanders. As the days counted down to D-Day, the Allied forces felt a mix of excitement and tension. They were hopeful these tactics would give them the crucial edge they needed. The deception allowed them to take advantage of German weaknesses and significantly increase their chances for success on the actual day of the invasion. By blinding the enemy to their true intentions, the Allies prepared themselves for what would be a monumental moment in the fight against Nazi Germany. On June 6, 1944, the day finally arrived. The Allies launched what would become the largest amphibious assault in history on the beaches of Normandy. As dawn broke, thousands of soldiers, sailors, and airmen prepared for an operation that they hoped would change the course of the war. The atmosphere was tense. Troops landed on the beaches in waves, facing intense resistance from German forces who were well entrenched. The moment those landing crafts hit the sand, all hell broke loose. Heavy gunfire rained down on the soldiers, and many were met with fierce enemy fire as they struggled to gain a foothold on the beach. In those initial moments, the situation was chaotic. The hope and confidence that had built up during the months of planning quickly turned into fear. Soldiers were cut down before they could even set foot on the shore, and the high stakes of the operation became painfully clear. Heavy casualties were reported almost immediately. It was a desperate struggle for survival. Many troops faced obstacles they hadn't anticipated. The terrain was rough, and obstacles such as barbed wire and mines made the advance even more difficult. The sound of gunfire mixed with the cries of wounded men created a harrowing scene. As they fought to secure the beachhead, confusion and panic set in among some units, testing their resolve and training. Despite the chaos, some soldiers managed to regroup and move forward. Leaders shouted orders, trying to push their men onward in the face of overwhelming odds. They knew that if they could hold the beach, it would open up a path for more troops and supplies to follow. As the battle raged on, the initial hopes of a swift victory seemed to fade under the harsh reality of warfare. Yet, their determination to fight on was ignited by the knowledge that the future of Europe depended on their success. Despite the fears that gripped them, the Allies pressed forward, knowing they had to overcome the odds to fulfill the mission they set out to achieve. Despite the chaos and turmoil of June 6, 1944, the Allies managed to secure a foothold on the beaches of Normandy, but it came at a heavy price. The initial hurdles felt overwhelming, and as soldiers clawed their way onto the sand, they faced not only fierce enemy fire, but also the grim reality of their situation. As more troops landed and fought to hold their positions, it became clear that the invasion would not go as smoothly as they had hoped. The anticipated swift victory turned into a grueling battle filled with confusion and uncertainty. Fear began to settle in, affecting both the soldiers on the ground and the commanders overseeing the operation. They had envisioned a triumphant march inland, but instead, they were confronted with fierce resistance that threatened to halt their advance. Reports of casualties flooded in, and each report sent shockwaves through Allied command. The numbers were staggering, and the loss of life weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Commanders began to reassess their strategies, realizing that they had to adapt quickly to the new reality on the ground. Leaders gathered to discuss the situation while trying to maintain morale among their troops. They understood that their initial plans might need to change, and they needed to find new ways to push forward. Soldiers, grappling with their own fears, looked to their leaders for guidance and reassurance. They knew that every decision made would impact not just the battle, but the fate of the entire operation. As the day wore on, the Allies fought hard not only to secure their positions, but also to make sense of the unfolding chaos. They leaned on each other for support in those critical moments. Survivors banded together, determined to move forward, understanding that their actions today could shape the future of Europe tomorrow. The struggle on the beaches of Normandy was just the beginning, and they knew the fight was far from over. As the battle for Normandy raged on, the Allies quickly realized just how determined the German forces were. The resistance was fierce, and it became clear that the path to success was going to be much harder than they had anticipated. What had started as a confident push to liberate Europe was transforming into a grueling campaign filled with uncertainty and setbacks. The Allies faced unexpected challenges at every turn. German troops were well prepared and fought back with everything they had. This determined defense made it increasingly difficult for the Allies to push inland. Instead of a swift victory, they found themselves involved in intense struggles for every inch of ground. As days passed, the initial optimism that fueled their charge began to erode. Soldiers who had landed with high hopes now confronted the grim reality of the fight. They witnessed their fellow soldiers fall, and the sounds of battle, the explosions, the gunfire, and the cries for help were constant reminders of the stakes involved. Every advance came at a cost, and as the Allies pressed on, fear and exhaustion began to set in. Leaders in command had to reassess their strategies, often adapting on the fly. The plans that seemed solid during the preparation stages now required adjustments based on the harsh reality of the battlefield. The clarity of the ground situation brought a sobering understanding. The fight against such a formidable enemy would demand far more than anticipated. The soldiers had to dig deep within themselves for strength and resilience. They knew that they were part of something much larger than just a battle. They were standing up against tyranny. As uncertainty loomed, every soldier leaned on their training and camaraderie for support. They had to hold on to the belief that their sacrifices would ultimately contribute to a greater cause, a free and liberated Europe. Despite the uphill battle they faced, the resolve to continue fighting burned within them, knowing that their efforts on these brutal shores were pivotal in the larger fight against the Axis powers. Ultimately, Operation Overlord marked a crucial turning point in World War II. While the Allies managed to establish a foothold in Europe by landing on the beaches of Normandy, the journey ahead was anything but easy. What began as a confident offensive quickly turned into a tough reality check. The soldiers were now faced with the grim understanding that this battle was only the start of a much longer fight. The initial sense of victory began to fade, replaced by a deep-seated fear of the prolonged conflict that lay ahead. The losses suffered on D-Day weighed heavily on everyone's hearts. Many brave soldiers had made the ultimate sacrifice, and those who survived now grappled with the harsh truths of war. Fear, uncertainty, and exhaustion became their constant companions. As the Allies began to push inland, they knew that while D-Day was a significant success, the fight against Nazi tyranny was daunting and would demand every ounce of strength they had. They faced challenges at every turn: fortified German positions, supply shortages, and the relentless pressure of the enemy. But despite these obstacles, the determination to fight on remained strong. The operation underscored the bravery of countless men and women who had come together for a common cause. Their courage in the face of adversity painted a vivid picture of the struggle against oppression. As they advanced, each small gain was hard-won, reminding them of the sacrifices that had been made to get this far. The impact of Operation Overlord reverberated through the remaining years of the war. The Allies had shown that they could strike back against the Nazis, igniting hope for liberation across occupied Europe. This massive endeavor not only shifted the balance of power, but also united the Allies in a shared commitment to finish what they had started and to fight for a future free from tyranny.